Diyos. Maraming salamat po sa buhay at lakas na aming taglay, sa liwanag ng kaisipan at sa pagkakataong maipagpatuloy ang pag-aaral ng mga kabataan. Gabayan mo po ang bawat isa sa amin. Anuman ang bahagi na aming gagampanan, naway maging maayos at matagumpay ang pagtuturo at pag-aaral na aming gagawin sa araw na ito. Patawarin mo po kami sa aming mga pagkulang at pagkakasala. At sa aming paggawa, ikaw po ang aming makasama. Amen.
Good day, virtual learners. Welcome to our Season 2 of Valenzuela Live in our first session in oral communication. I hope everyone is doing well despite these trying times. We are lucky that with the support of our local government, headed by our Honorable Mayor Rex T. Gatchalian, we were able to find ways to bring education closer and more accessible to Valenzuelano students. I know you miss going to school while seeing your teachers and classmates, but we must face and embrace this new normal. Good thing that we have access to the internet because we still have options on how we can communicate with each other. This school year might not give us the opportunity to see each other inside the classroom or face-to-face, but this does not exempt us to acquire and develop new knowledge. And I hope you are excited to learn with me, because in this morning session, we will try to develop these most essential learning competencies, which are to define communication and explain the nature and process of communication. As we go deeper to what oral communication is about, it is important to know what the preliminaries about communication itself. Before we start, let me pose these questions for you to ponder. How do you convey a particular message to someone? Among the available modes of message transfer, which of these works best for you? May you find answers to these questions as I discuss the following concepts about communication. To start, let us define our main word of the day, communication. Its etymology comes from the Latin word communicare, which means to share or to make something common. I believe we all know that when we say communication, it involves a message to be shared, wherein this message is something to be understood by other person involved in the communication process. On its working definition, communication here is the process by which people transmit information, share verbal and non-verbal messages, and create meaning with each other. Let us have our third definition. Communication is a process of sharing and conveying messages or information from one person to another within and across channels, contexts, media, and cultures. This is according to McCornack of 2014. From these definitions, from the etymology to its working definition and McCornack's definition, what are the similar ideas they share? Communication involves a message, right? There are persons involved. There is a channel or the medium to how the message will be transmitted. In what situations does communication happen then? There is a wide variety of contexts and situations in which communication can be manifested. It can be a face-to-face interaction, a phone conversation, a group discussion, a meeting or interview, a letter correspondence, a class recitation, and I believe being inside their homes for quite a while, you can name some other communication scenarios that you have experienced inside your home. Like how you deal with your Lazada and Shopee deliveries, how you communicate with people online, and how you encourage your siblings or your parents to dance for TikTok. And during this quarantine period, we have been more exposed to using online platforms like Zoom, Skype, Google Meet, and social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, through our laptops and Android phones. Or Apple, right? Looking at the scenarios, we have to acknowledge that communication is not a message alone because it involves different elements and they are equally important. Let us now be familiar with the elements of communication. The first one is we have the sender. The sender is the source of information or message. The sender can also be called as the encoder, the speaker, or the source because it is where the message comes from. Another or the second element is message. Message is the information, idea, thoughts conveyed by the speaker in words or in action. So you see here that language plays a vital role in forming your message, in making sure that you will communicate with the same language being spoken with the person you are talking to. Because we all know that in communication, it should be using a certain language wherein people speak the same. Alright? Another would be, aside from the verbal words, we also use non-verbal as a form of message. So later on, I will try to find further about that. Next, the third element is encoding. Encoding is the process of converting the message into words, actions, or other forms that the speaker understands. This tells us that communication starts when the source already formed an idea or thought of a message that he or she wants to impart. The fourth element is a channel. It is the medium or the means such as personal or non-personal, verbal or non-verbal, in which the encoded message is conveyed. Examples of this are through snail mail, through electronic modes like email, video conferencing, or text messaging, and a lot more. For the fifth element is the decoding. It is the process of interpreting the encoded message of the speaker by the receiver. On the sixth element, we have the receiver. So the receiver is the recipient of the message or someone who decodes the message. For the seventh one is feedback. Feedback is the reaction, response, or information provided by the receiver. So here, you will see that the message comes from the source or the sender, and the feedback would come from the receiver. Of course, on an information shared, a feedback is essential to check whether the communication is effective or understood. But later you will discover that feedback is not always included on some communication models. For the eighth element is we have the context. So what is context? It is the environment where communication takes place. Communication may happen on different situations and this dictates different atmosphere and language and message to be conveyed. Try to imagine yourself inside the classroom talking with your teachers, then with your classmates. You speak differently, right? So it's a different context. Communication is very formal inside the classroom during conferences or class discussions, in the courtroom or in a job interview. While we have casual communication with our peers, close friends, and family members. And last on our list, which everybody wishes not included in this list, is the barrier, or these are the factors that affect the flow of communication. This can also be called a noise or interference. It is any distraction, whether external or internal, which competes with the message for the receiver's attention. So we have different types of barriers. For the first one is we have physical or environmental. Second is physiological. Third, psychological or attitudinal. Fourth is social barrier. Five is educational barrier. And last is cultural barrier. So what are these types? Let me discuss further. So when we talk about physical or environmental barrier, this refers to coughing, whispering, talking, or the temperature of a room. Okay, so you will see here that whenever someone is coughing, it disrupts the message. Or when one speaks too soft, it's very hard to decode what is the message all about. Or for example, inside the classroom, when some of the students are too loud whenever the teacher is talking, there is a barrier. Or for example, in the context of online meetings or online classes, whenever some classmates would have unmuted their microphone unintentionally, there is a barrier. Or in temperature of a room, how can that happen? For example, imagine yourself inside a very cold room wherein you would feel sleepy or you would feel frozen, that it disrupts your listening, right? So that is about physical or environmental barrier. For the physiological barrier, this one pertains to headache or hunger. So this one pertains to a certain feeling or situation of the speaker or of the listener. And then we have the psychological or attitudinal, where this one pertains to the attitude, emotion, or the stereotypes. Okay, for example, if the person is feeling very angry, it's very hard to express himself, that one may be tactless, right? So it's very hard to speak with them. Or for example, on a certain stereotypical scenario wherein we expect male dominates the female. So that's another thing. Another type of barrier is social barrier, wherein the person communicating with you is not your friend or someone you respect. On the social barrier, this one observes ranking. Alright? So on some instances, you need to be careful whenever you talk with someone who is in rank or with a position. In some circumstances, you may go too honest and comfortable with a friend that we are tagged as insensitive. See, it can be considered as a social barrier as well. Next barrier is educational barrier. So when does this happen? So an example given here is when a person claims, I'm too smart to listen to this stuff. So this pertains to a situation where a person is too confident with their intelligence that there is no room for them to acknowledge mistakes and improvement. The same with other scenarios wherein a person naman is on the other side of the pole, wherein one claims that he or she is too dumb or too slow to catch up with the lesson. So that's another barrier. Next, how about cultural barriers? It is the difference in political, cultural, religious beliefs, etc. We must acknowledge that there is cultural relativism, that there is diversity in our religion and political principles. Now, let us have a short activity to test how well you were able to understand the different types of barriers. So I have your pictures, and I want you to identify which type of barrier the picture presents. Let's start with number one. You see here two persons. The man is pointing at the woman's face with a stern expression, and they are both wearing office clothes. What do you think is the barrier in this scenario? I can accept two. You were right. This could be a social barrier, that the man could be a boss and the woman is his secretary, which comes to another possible barrier, which is psychological barrier. Correct? Because it presents a stereotypical scenario of a man showing dominance over a woman. Let us have the number two picture. So this should be easy for you. We see here two silhouettes and with different flags. So we may say that they speak different languages. The person on the right speaks French and German, while the person on the right speaks American. Though in the middle, they speak the same language, which is Grecian and Italian. What type of barrier could this be? Great, this is cultural barrier because of the language or culture they speak. The third photo shows a woman who is holding her temple. She might not be feeling well. What could be a possible barrier when you are talking to someone who doesn't feel right? Yes, it is a psychological barrier. Last two. On this fourth photo, this might tell us the two is watching a movie, yet the man is trying to say something to his seatmate, which might distract the person he is talking to. Aside from that, his proximity or his close distance may also add to the person's discomfort. What kind of barrier is this? Correct, it's a physical barrier. For our last photo, what do we have here? So a woman is holding a wire phone, but her face tells us a lot of things. while holding the phone far from her. She might be what? Angry? Frustrated? What social barrier is present in this photo? Good job! It is indeed a psychological barrier. Be careful with your spellings, class. Thank you for your participation. Moving on, let us plot these elements in our communication models to see how they work. So here are the different communication models. Let's start with the Shannon-Weaver model. It is known as the mother of all the communication models. The Shannon-Weaver model of 1949 depicts communication as a linear or one-way process. Consists of 5 elements, which is the source or the producer of the message, the transmitter or the encoder of the message into signals, a channel which signals adapted for transmission, a receiver or the decoder of message from the signal, and a destination. This model, however, has been criticized for missing one essential element in the communication process. What do you think is it? It's feedback. Without feedback, the speaker will not know whether the receiver understands the message or not. Because when the message has reached its final destination, communication has been accomplished. Because in this model, communication occurred when the message has been sent and received. Feedback is not part of this model. Let us look closely on the illustration of this model. Communication happens when an information source, a sender, has a message and transmits that message in the form of a signal through a channel. Then that signal is received by the receiver at its final destination. Along the way, there might be some noise in the communication system that might negatively influence the process. This is because this model is not designed for face-to-face communication. Since this was proposed in 1949, this model was designed for telegraph, telephone, and radio where communication is linear. And that is a revelation, dear virtual learners. How about our second model of communication? So we have here the transactional model by Dean Barland. He believes that communication is dynamic, circular, and continuous, where the receiver and the sender can exchange roles during the communication process. Transaction model is a two-way process with the inclusion of feedback as one element. This model is considered to be more interactive because there is a collaborative exchange of messages between communicators with the aim of understanding each other. It also shows that a barrier such as noise may interfere with the flow of communication. This model now happens on a more collaborative work or face-to-face interaction. After presenting with you the elements in the communication models, we can now identify the nature of communication. First is communication is a process. The second one is communication occurs between two or more people, which involves the speaker and the receiver. The third one is communication can be expressed through written or spoken words, actions in the form of nonverbal, or both spoken words and nonverbal actions at the same time. To elaborate what is verbal communication, verbal communication refers to an interaction in which words are used to relay a message. For effective and successful verbal communication, use words to express ideas which can be easily understood by the person you're talking to. As I told you, language is a vital element. What should be considered in engaging in this type of verbal communication? One is appropriateness. The language that you use should be appropriate to the environment or occasion, or the context, whether it is formal or informal or casual. Second one is brevity. It is to sound more credible, you should use simple yet precise and powerful words. We can achieve brevity by being more direct with our words, avoid fillers and insubstantial expressions which do not add to the message, such as, I guess, and a lot more fillers. For the third one is clarity. It is the meaning of words, feelings, or ideas may be interpreted differently by a listener. Hence, it is essential for you to clearly state your message and express your ideas and feelings. Remember, whenever you send chat or SMS, we may use emoticons to express feelings or to lighten the mood, right? So that's one way of portraying clarity. Next is ethics. Ethics are the words should be carefully chosen in consideration of the gender, roles, ethnicity, preferences, and status of the person or people you're talking to. That's why it is very important that before you send your message to someone, make sure that you know their background so that you would know how to choose your words correctly and to observe proper ethics. The fifth one is vividness. This one are the words that vividly or creatively describe things or feelings, usually to add color and spice to communication. Hence, you are encouraged to find ways to charm your audience through the use of vivid words. Vivid words is very different to highfalutin words, okay? So here are some examples. For example, other ways to say nice, you may say it's enjoyable, pleasurable, thoughtful, gorgeous, lovely. Aside from the word good, you may say excellent, amazing, wonderful, pleasant. How about the word bad? Instead of saying bad, you may say it's awful, it's naughty, mean, dreadful, nasty, wicked. How about sad? You may say depressed, gloomy, miserable, cheerless. How about the word happy? You may say that you are cheerful, delighted, pleased, glad, joyful, ecstatic, and a lot of words. You may use your thesaurus to look for other words that you may substitute. No? Next is non-verbal communication. This refers to an interaction where behavior is used to convey and represent meanings. All kinds of human responses that are not expressed in words are classified as non-verbal communication. Examples of non-verbal communication are stares, smiles, tone of voice, movement, manners of walking, standing, and seating, appearance, style of attire, attitude towards time and space, personality, gestures, and others. And the mastery of non-verbal communication is important for several reasons. Later on, when we have our different episodes, you would know further about these non-verbals. So, here are the importance. Number one is it enhances and emphasizes the message of your speech, thus making it more meaningful, truthful, and relevant. Second one is it can communicate feelings, attitudes, and perceptions without you saying a word. If you can remember your mother just looking at you or staring at you whenever she asks you to do something, you know already the meaning, right? So, staring or the eyes can already send a message. So that's one of the nonverbals. Third one, it can sustain the attention of listeners and keep them engaged in the speech. For example, it depends on the tone of your voice, the volume, and the pitch. And this one is one way also of engaging your audience in your speaking activity. Next, it gives the audience a preview of the type of speaker you are. Next one, it makes you appear more dynamic and animated in your delivery. It serves as a channel to release tension and nervousness. It helps make your speech more dramatic. Or it can build a connection with listeners. More importantly, whenever you do eye-to-eye contact, that's one of the vital things of public speaking. So it's one way of building rapport with your audience. Next, it makes you a credible speaker. And nonverbals helps you vary your speaking style and avoid a monotonous delivery. So that is about what communication and the elements and the models are. So now let's go to our question and answer. So here is our first question. Is silence considered a feedback? What do you think, dear learners? Is it a yes or a no? Is silence considered a feedback? Absolutely, it's a yes. One good example is whenever your teacher asks you at the end of the lesson if you have questions. What is your usual response? Silence. And silence can be considered as a non-verbal message because obviously it doesn't have any verbal message, but as a non-verbal, this can convey a strong message like guilt and contempt. Let's go to the second question. What are the limitations of written communication? Here, the limitations of a written communication is that it is expressionless. It is very hard to see the sincerity of the message because you cannot see the person who has sent the message. Maybe that is why people make use of emojis or emoticon as part of their written message to emphasize their emotion or point. For the third question, how can we tell that effective communication has taken place? In the context of the Shannon-Weaver model, communication is effective when the message reached its destination, while in the transactional model, since it's a two-way process, communication is effective when the receiver provided the appropriate feedback. Try to recall in the classroom whenever the teacher already says, you copy and answer what is written on the board, and you still ask, ma'am, copy and answer? What do you think? Is the communication effective? It's for you to answer. And so for our next virtual meeting, we will discuss more on the following: types of the nonverbal communication, effective communication skills, and the intercultural communication. So that is about for this morning session. With that, happy learning. See you on our next virtual meeting. Goodbye.